Sincerely, me. She stood shivering in the rain, watching the words on the letter dissolve under the downpour. Her hair was dripping, her lips tasted salty, and everything ached. Under the dim light of a nearby lamppost, she had scrabbled through the pockets of her jacket, looking for some sort of clue to who she was, where she was, what was going on. She had found 2 letters in the inside pocket. The first envelope had been addressed simply, "To you." The second envelope just had the number 2 written on it. She shook her head angrily and stared up at the storm, watching the lightning fork across the sky. She fumbled in another pocket, and her fingers closed on a bulky shape. She pulled it out and looked at a long, thin cardboard box that was getting all soggy and losing its shape. Typed on a prescription label was some long chemical term and the name Myfanwy Thomas. She clenched her fingers and felt the firm plastic of the EpiPen, and then put the box back in her pocket. "This is who I am," she thought bitterly. "I don't even get the luxury of not knowing what my name is. I don't get a chance to start a life. Whoever this Myfanwy Thomas was, she managed to get me into a whole lot of trouble." She sniffed and wiped her nose on her sleeve. She looked around at the place she was in. Some sort of park. Willows drooped their long tendrils down around the clearing, and she was standing on what used to be a lawn, but was rapidly becoming a mud hole. She came to a decision, pulled her feet out of the mire, and stepped carefully over the ring of bodies that were scattered around her. They were all motionless, and all of them were wearing latex gloves. She was hugging herself and completely soaked by the time she made it out of the park. Recalling the letter's warning, she'd been wary, scanning her surroundings for any attackers hidden among the trees. Thunder crashed above her, and she flinched away from it. The path brought her out of the park, and she stared at the scene before her. Clearly, the park was in the middle of some sort of residential area. There was a row of Victorian-style houses before her. They were no doubt pretty, she thought grimly, but she wasn't in the mood to appreciate them as they deserved. There were no lights on in any of the windows, and a cold wind had started blowing. Still, she squinted down to the end of the road and could make out the distant neon glow that promised some sort of business emporium. Sighing, she began to walk that way, shoving her hands into her armpits to stop their shaking. An ATM visit and a phone call made from a rather battered phone box later, and she was sitting in the back of a cab being ferried to a 5-star hotel. Several times she looked back, checking to see if any cars were following, and once she asked the cab driver to make 2 U-turns. Nothing suspicious happened, although the cabbie gave her some funny looks in the mirror. When they finally arrived at the hotel, she muttered something about a stalker boyfriend, and the driver nodded knowledgeably, his eyes lingering on her face. The hotel management students, who had been saddled with doorman duty on the graveyard shift, lived up to their training and didn't bat an eyelid as they swung open the doors for a soaking wet woman. She walked through the glorious foyer, leaving a dripping trail on the tiles. The impeccably dressed and coiffed desk clerk. At 3 a.m? What kind of monstrous automaton was this woman? Politely stifled a yawn and barely widened her eyes when the person who hesitantly identified herself as Anne Ryan checked in without a reservation or luggage. A bellboy did a poor job of appearing awake, but he managed to guide her to her room and work the keycard thing for her. She neglected to tip him, but assumed that her shattered appearance might earn her some forgiveness on that score. She stripped and rejected a bath on the rationale that she might fall asleep in the water and drown in some flower-scented oblivion. Instead, she showered. She saw massive bruises blossoming on her body. She gasped in pain when she crouched down to pick up the soap, then finished the shower, wrapped herself in a big fluffy robe, and staggered out into the bedroom. She caught movement out of the corner of her eye, and she stared at the stranger in the mirror. She looked automatically at the face, which was dominated by 2 nasty black eyes. Bloody hell, she thought. No wonder the cab driver bought my story about an abusive boyfriend.